Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel, The Woken Mind. Today, I have a special guest here. This is Dawn.
Hello,
And
everyone.
could you introduce yourself to the
Yeah,
channel? Let them know a little bit about you, your
sure.
background.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Laura, for having me on. I'm very excited to be doing this interview before we were chatting a little bit about, our respective backgrounds and what we feel needs to get out there in the world. And I don't know, I personally got excited when I was talking to you about what kind of information that we're going to be able to get out there. So yeah, it's going to be a great interview. So a little bit about myself. I have been doing men's coaching for a number of years now. I live in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. It's a little conscious town in the middle of southern Ecuador, right next to the Amazon. And yeah, I've been working with helping develop men in their emotional and their spiritual intelligence so that they can attract in high quality, high conscious women so that we can help bring about a better and more beautiful world. And that's just kind of the niche that I work on. But I do lots of other things as well. So that's a little nutshell for me.
Yes. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing. And I'm so happy to have you here because today we're going to talk about healing the emasculation that we're seeing in society right now. And Don and I spoke a little bit before jumping into this interview, and I said, let's talk about what led to this emasculation here in society. And Don saying, I don't know if we can go into that in a brief video. So we're going to try our best
Sure.
to summarize
Yeah.
everything that led up to this point. And
Mhm.
then not just that, not just look at the problem, but we're also going to then offer some solutions here. And that's what I really love about Don's work, his ability to go in and give really practical tips and guidance for core masculines that are looking to strengthen their masculine energy and attract a feminine who is high vibrational so that we can build these conscious relationships, because that's such a big part of bringing back the balance of the masculine and feminine here on earth.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Couldn't agree more. I think the first time that we had a call together, we were talking about being able to create conscious relationships. And that if you want to make a great change in the world, you have to first have a conscious relationship that is expounding upon these principles as core values that you're teaching your children before you can even think about creating that kind of world. But what's going on now is that we're at the stage of needing to heal the masculine and the feminine dynamics that seem to be butting heads with one another, that seem to be two polarized opposites of the same coin that just keep smacking each other over and over and over again without integrating, right? And so that's what we're going to try to get into today and talk a little bit about why it was this way in the first place, what's going on currently, and like you said, practical things on which we can integrate those things. Yeah. So you want to get started, Laura? What's been your perspective, your observation as to how we've got ourselves in this mess in the first place?
Yes. Thanks for passing it along to me. I'll offer little bits of my perspective on this, right? For those of you that have been on this channel for a while, following me here, I used to do masculine, feminine updates, and I used to speak about exactly, what happened with the fall and what happened when we had the wisdom of the feminine come in, and we then had this masculine energy that wanted to dominate, and then we also had this feminine energy that didn't want to surrender to the leadership of the masculine. So we saw this separation consciousness. And I believe that it was, in my opinion, and I don't know how you feel about this, Don, but I really feel that this was part of the journey always, that we
Sure.
had to descend into this separation to
Mhm.
see it, to
Mhm.
really feel what
Mhm.
it's like to be disconnected with the
Yeah.
masculine and feminine so that we can consciously work to bring it back together. That's my perspective. How do
Well,
you
that's the
feel?
whole beauty. That's the whole beauty of duality. The only way, that's the only way we're going to know what compassion is if we know what it's not like to feel loved. And that's the game of duality, is that it's a tough game, but it's the game that we all decided to play. And that's kind of one of the ways in which I've approached difficult situations in my life, just kind of as a non sequitur point, is just looking at it as a game because it is a game. It's a very advanced game. Have you ever seen the TV show Westworld?
Oh, yes. Oh, I love, and I use it all the time for
Yeah,
spiritual metaphors. Yes.
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like we're basically in Westworld, right? Except we all have consciousness. We live by, cosmic law and, a natural law. There's specific foundational rules to the game, but that's just the way that I approach things is that it's a game. So getting back to your point about the original separation, yeah, it was always meant to be this way. And actually, interestingly enough, if you read one of parts of the Bible that I think a lot of people overlook, it says to eat of the knowledge, to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is a very, very key point, because before they ate of the tree, basically had a separation of unity consciousness, it shows that they actually didn't have a concept of duality, because they didn't know what good or evil meant. So this fracturing of the psyche implies that they were in oneness, they were in unity consciousness, and then their mind bifurcated into this dualistic perspective. And then the whole game is to unify back to the oneness, right? Which is part of our work, which is the integration of each respective polarity that resides within each of us. But depending on your gender or your sexuality, you have more of one energy present within you, and its manifestation is stronger. So men has a stronger yang energy, and women has a stronger yin energy. But there's whole deep dynamics. I don't want to go too deep into that, but so I totally agree with you. I think it's been here from the beginning.
Yeah, yes. I love that explanation. And I really see that we're playing out, I see it as source separated from itself and created negative and positive polarity in order to replicate, because it needed to separate to replicate, right? And so then as we came down into density and we came further and further, and that's the fall, right? And that's what the Bible is really explaining, is the fall in consciousness, so that we could create earth density. We then had to replicate what had happened in our physical avatars, and we do that through gender. And so we're pretty much just, as above, so below. We are representing that split of the negative and positive polarity that allowed for the replication that birthed the universe within our relationships.
That's right.
And so relationships are so powerful. That's why relationships are, there's so many of us, and we were speaking about this before on one of our calls, where both of us studied spiritual knowledge and wisdom before coming into coaching and helping people with relationships.
Right.
And it really seems like this is the most practical way to reach that God consciousness now, is through the relationship.
It's certainly one of the best ways, but some of the deepest esoteric teachings is that you don't need a relationship to bring you to wholeness. You should just integrate it within yourself. That's essentially like alchemy. It's the integration of both the masculine and feminine within yourself. Have you read the book, The Celestine Prophecy, by any chance?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's a really, really good book. Highly recommend it. You could probably read it in a day, but they have a beautiful analogy that says, if you're looking for your other half, that implies that you yourself are only half a person. But if you look for so like this is like one half circle getting here together, that makes a circle. But if you yourself are whole and integrated, you'll find another hole and you'll make an infinity sign. And I just love that analogy. It was so poignant, right? And so perfect the way that they describe it. And that's the point of this inner work, is that the way that you can really attract in the highest partner, if that's what you're seeking, or come into your highest purpose, whether you're a man or a woman, is that integration process, is the emotional and the spiritual intelligence. And it is the mastery of oneself, because the more you master yourself, the more consciousness you have, the easier the game becomes. It's like you're understanding the rules of the game so much easier that you just become this grand chess master, and you're just playing the game like Neo in the Matrix. Like, I just love that analogy, right? Yeah.
I love that. And that's, one of the ways I tend to teach and I work with people is I tell them that, yes, we look at the relationship, but the relationship is only a reflection of what's happening in the internal process.
Precisely.
So it's the mirror. it's great to have, because
Yeah.
it really allows you to evaluate how far you've come
Yes.
and what you need to work on. And, you know, if you were just existing with just self, it's a little bit harder to not have that mirror present.
That's right.
Imagine a world without mirrors.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, with that said, that relationships are the mirror.
Mhm.
Uh, and I wanted to again go back to the emasculation that we're seeing
Yes.
in
Yes. Yeah.
and society. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Your
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
Don, about why we're
Yes.
seeing that in
Totally.
relationships, in society, within ourselves?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that I want to start not necessarily from the inception of mankind. I want to go more recently within recent history. Now, without giving you a gigantic history lecture, throughout the past number of hundreds of years, there has been an overly dominating masculine patriarchal type of mentality that's been going on. I will say first and foremost that a healed patriarchal mentality is what we actually need to get us out of this mess. This is an unintegrated, traumatized patriarchal mentality. And so I think we're pointing the finger at the wrong thing. It's, we say, oh, that's the patriarchal, it's the patriarch, it's bad. I'm like, no, you're actually pointing at the shadow and the manifestation of an unhealed, unintegrated man that is trying to lead the world in a self-destructive way, which would equally happen if a woman led the world and was also unintegrated. And that's very important to point out. And actually, there's a common misnomer that, a lot of people say, oh, if women ran the world, then, we would just have peace on earth. That's actually not true. There's a book that was written by Merlin Stone, who was one of the original authors in studying women's history throughout time. And she wrote a really good book called When God Was a Woman. And it actually shows that although a lot of the societies were much more egalitarian in their structure, they were equally as bellicose or warlike. And so that's actually a misnomer. So which is interesting. And this goes with the destructive feminine as well. It can be just as destructive as the unintegrated masculine. So that's the whole point, is the integration. So at a certain point, I would say it's around the time of Susan B. Anthony when this whole women's movement came about, and women basically for a very long period of time, and perhaps in some places in the world today, feel like second-class citizens. And a lot of places they didn't have the right to vote. Their opinions didn't matter. They couldn't hold office. They couldn't do a lot of these things. So they felt like they were inferior to a man. And so as a way of trying to express their frustration, they have moved through different cycles through the feminist movement of first trying to gain equality and then trying to become as equal as men in the workplace, and then now to the point of actually becoming men. So it's like we're getting so twisted with the whole point of what this whole integration is going. And this is the polarity swinging in way too many different directions, trying to self-correct itself to get to the middle, which is what we're getting at. And so what has happened is that the reason why women didn't, the reason why there was this expression of frustration for the patriarchy in the first place was because the men that were running the world had what I brashly call emotional and spiritual retardation. And this is, I mean, that's what it is basically. And so a lot of men were taught that if you express your emotions or whatever, that you're and that you're all this emasculating things, and that this is somehow making you less of a man. When in actuality, there's healthy ways to integrate these emotions without actually having yourself feel emasculated. But there's a way in which we need to approach it, which fortunately, there's a lot of other people that are talking about how to actually do this in a healthy way. And so what has happened is that women have felt like their boundaries were being crossed. And so as a way of trying to feel equal in a man's eyes, they try to become like men. They're like, if you're not going to respect us for who we are now in our feminine essence, then we're going to try to become like you, which is against the yin nature, And it's not to discredit their efforts. A lot of the efforts that they've done have allowed for more rights of women and more egalitarian-like mentalities within cultural paradigms, but it's pushed too far. And so that's how we've gotten to the state we are now. So now what's going on is there's been the rise of third wave feminism. And third wave feminism creates, especially within the Western world, this hyper entitlist mentality of women, that just because I'm a woman, I'm God's gift to earth, and that a man needs to be a traditional man, but there's no way in hell that I'm going to be a traditional woman. And there's so much hypocrisy within this. This has led to these movements that a lot of the younger audiences are partaking in, which are called the Red Pill movement, and a lot of other sub movements. Another one called MGTOW, which stands for Men Going Their Own Way, and it talks about these very low consciousness kind of what is it, like law of the jungle, law of the land kind of mindsets, very base and primal instincts of how men and women interact within relationships, which if you're at a low state of consciousness, this is how you're going to be operating on. But as I was telling Laura in some of our calls before, these principles don't really apply if you have integrated them enough. It doesn't really work this way, but I don't want to go too far into this. So as a result of this hyper entitlement of, women rule the world, girl bosses, all this stuff, F men, we don't need them. This whole equally polarized and angry movement has arisen, and we're at kind of an impasse right now. And so this is where our work comes in, of seeing the wisdom of both sides and integrating the wisdom of both sides, but in a healthy, holistic, and heart-based way. Right. And so this is what's going to lead into what our whole conversation today is going on right now, and what men need to do and women need to do respectively to navigate this unstable transition within humanity right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love everything that you just explained. It's my own personal understanding of what we're seeing. And, it's always about the balance in everything, right? Light and dark, left and right. Hemispheres of the brain, the soul and the ego, the masculine and the feminine. So to think that the way to fix the situation is to completely destroy the patriarchy rather than heal it is really this backwards way of thinking.
That's right.
And so, this whole concept of I'm a goddess and I need to be worshipped really actually sets women back, or feminines back, right? Because it places the masculine beneath the feminine, when what we're trying to do is actually bring them back into this equal balance, so that we can honor both our soul and our ego as equals, and show up here in our full, authentic, highest self here on the physical plane.
Yeah, I just got this beautiful download when you said that, and I'm so grateful that you mentioned that, because the goddess is meant to serve as the muse for the man. And so the feminine is meant to be explored and admired and worshiped. And this is why women have been seen as this amazing figure to have or conquer or chase after. This is why men do crazy things for women and go to war for women, because in a sense, women are meant to be worshiped. However, there's a big but. If a woman's like, I'm a woman, I need to be worshipped, that's not the point. See, because a woman in her fullest feminine essence carries a sense of self-respect and inherently brings about that kind of admiration that comes from a healed and integrated and embodied woman.
Absolutely.
And it's the same with like men, right? So when a man is competent and he's leading with his heart and he considers other people, and he acts for the greatest good of humanity and for his family and for his children and for his wife, naturally a woman is going to say, oh, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. I can feel safe and trust that he's going to make the best decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I just recently, I don't know if you caught it on Instagram, I posted about that the immature feminine wants to be the muse and wants to be put on the pedestal and worshipped. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of comments from people that were saying, well, I still want to be the muse. Mm-hmm. And, I did word it that way very strongly to kind of get that point across, that we don't want the feminine on this pedestal, but at the same time, the desire to want to be someone else's muse ends up kind of distorted form of the feminine. Desire to be your own muse, to be that inspiration, inspires that self-respect within the feminine that then allows her just to, to represent that energy that is respected by the masculine. So when you into it saying, I'm going to be the muse. That's a very selfish,
Very
super
selfish.
of
Yeah.
the
Yeah. It's kind of, thank you for bringing that up. It's kind of a paradox, because the second you say, I want to be a leader, I want to lead, I want women to submit to me, that's the second that, you know, everybody's going to turn up their noses and be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Right. But if you actually, it's what do they say? Actions speak louder than words. If you actually do this work, these things naturally manifest themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not like that's a bad thing. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like those, to know and not to do is not to know.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like
Right.
you can know, like, oh, okay, my truest essence is to be an inspiration. My truest essence is to lead. But if you're just talking about this and you're just like this blowhard about what you think you need to do, but you don't actually walk the walk, you're a hypocrite.
Right.
And this is where there's this is dishonesty. This is like a person that's being dishonest. You could say one thing and think one way, but if you do the opposite, then you're a dishonest person. Right.
Which is what we see with the majority of our leaders right now. So that's why we're seeing the distorted patriarchy. It's not the true masculine leadership that we all deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And with that said, I think that's a great way to just move into how can we begin to heal the masculine. Now, I put out a reel on Instagram a couple days ago. I'm not sure how long, when this video will be released, but it will be probably pretty recently in my Instagram feed. But I said that what we're seeing is the distorted masculine being dethroned, pretty much taken down. And we're also seeing the wounded masculine slowly repairing himself and rising, because really the masculine, the true masculine that was operating from a place of the heart, was actually really suppressed just as much as the feminine by the distorted patriarchy. And that's something that a lot of people don't really want to talk about or address. And that is what leaves us in this imbalance, because if we say, oh, the patriarchy and we've got to restore the feminine, what about the masculine who was integrated with his feminine, who was suppressed also by the patriarchy? Yeah. So I would like to just talk about how do we begin to heal or repair masculine energy that has been emasculated by both the distorted patriarchy and the feminist movements that then wanted to, that pretty much wanted revenge, but didn't realize that they were also taking out their ally here. The pure feminine integrated masculine. Yes.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up. That's very pertinent to bring that up, that the desire for men to integrate their feminine was also suppressed by the wounded masculine. I've never thought of it in that perspective. So thank you for putting it in that way. That makes me ponder a little bit on that. That's true. So I mean, I have a couple things that I would bring up. Do you want to start up those tips, or I can start it up if you want?
Please jump in.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So I wrote down 3 practical things that a man can do to strengthen their masculinity. But what's actually quite interesting is that this also works for the feminine, but there's just like a slight change in this. And, you know, for those that are astute, you'll see that this works in both perspectives, right? All right. And so that's the whole point, is getting back to the integration. But, you know, being a man and doing this work for many, many years, this has been what's been helpful to me. So the number one thing I would say is understanding what's going on in the first place and why things have gotten the way that they are. And a lot of people, they fall into what I call blaming the effect. So I'll give a very good example. So, oh, the alcohol is my problem. Oh, if I could just stop drinking, that'd be so much good. It's so much better. No, if you could heal the relationship that you have with your father that is making you feel like you hate yourself, which is turning you to drink, that's going to fix the problem, right? And so a very practical example when it comes to this is, oh, these entitled women that just want to use me as an emotional punching bag or a bank account, they're the problems. It's like, well, I mean, that's part of the problem, but that's a manifestation of a deeper problem. So really, you have to first understand what's really going on and why these are happening. So I would encourage you, if you're more like bookish and academic, study the history of patriarchy and femininity. And, you know, you could start with like Merlin Stone, for example. She's a good feminist author, but you can also study equally really embodied masculine people throughout history and study their paradigms and their perspectives. Or just basic relationship books in general to understand from authors and experts why things have been happening in the first place. So whenever you do get into kind of a discourse with somebody that is operating on trauma or brainwashing, you can clearly and eloquently describe to them how you think and why I'm not your enemy and how I'm actually your ally. And then I'm trying to learn myself too, so that we can figure this out together rather than just point fingers at each other.
Yeah.
Just being able to say that to somebody that is operating out of fear and anger will feel so much better and will let them let their guard down so that you can actually have a healthy and healed and intelligent conscious conversation. That's huge because most people can't even get to that point in the first place. They'll just start pointing fingers and then it gets nowhere. It just blows up. Right. So that's a number one tip. Number two for men is develop what I call the four what I don't call them this, but they're the four masculine archetypes. And there's a really, really great book. It's called The King, the Warrior, the Lover, and the Magician. And each one of these archetypes, every man has, and through different phases of their lives, most men are developing one of these types of archetypes. And by really being able to map out your consciousness and your psyche, you can understand why you're doing certain things. And if you're operating on the shadow aspect of these archetypes, because every archetype has their respective shadow side, and each respective shadow side has a respective passive or active shadow side. So it's like those dolls, there's like multiple layers within the dolls. And by really understanding what's going on in your own mind, you can consciously make decisions to develop specific parts of yourself that you feel are lacking. And when you do integrate those archetypes, you will carry yourself as a more embodied man. And there's nothing that turns a woman on more than a conscious, integrated man that's living his purpose. Like, oh my God. Like even you watching this video alone and integrating this information will put you light years above the vast majority of men on this earth. Just understanding this just a little bit.
Yes.
And so that's the second point that I would recommend. And then the third, which is the most exciting part about being a traditionally young masculine man, is living his purpose. His highest purpose. And so a lot of people are like, well, what is your purpose? And I think people get caught up in the misnomer that your purpose is just this one static thing that you just do for the rest of your life. And your purpose is not static, although it may seem like it's static. Really what it is it's about analyzing everything that's going on in your life and seeking to become more perfect in every facet of your life, whether that's your finances or your health, your sexuality, your emotional intelligence, your spiritual intelligence, your connection with your woman or your children or your family or your community. All of those things are part of your highest purpose. And when you take your God-given gifts, whether you're a really good accountant or you're really good with your hands and seeking to figure out the way to be of love and service to other people, this is going to bring the most joy. This is going to bring the most fulfillment in your life. And it will naturally make you a magnet towards high value women, towards people that will respect you, and towards people that will look to you as a leader so that you can help bring about a more conscious community on the earth. So that's the 3 tips that I would give for developing and strengthening healthy, integrated masculine energy.
Oh, I love those. I love those. Those are awesome. I mean, like to give just these tidbits, right? To be able to make these tiny shifts in your life. Like you were saying, it's so powerful. If you can just take this information and you can put it to action, you are going to be, I mean, so far ahead of so many, because what we're seeing with the emasculation in society is that many people have put their masculine energy on autopilot. And I say people because it applies to men and women, right? Where the institutions, and it starts really with the school system, have taken over of the masculine energy. So they're like, well, let's just tell you how to do this. And even the church, right? And there's a reason why we had these institutions come into fruition, and they're kind of becoming, not necessary as we're beginning to become more and more conscious, and
Yes.
people are clinging to them because it
Yes.
feels comfortable and it feels safe. So a man or a woman may feel, okay, well, I'll just pursue this career path because the career counselor at my school told me that I should be interested in this. And then
Yes.
they'll tell me all the classes I need to take. And
Mhm.
I'll go to church and I'll probably sin all week, and then I'll be punished
Yeah.
and clear my slate here and I'll be all good. So that's just, it's complete autopilot, asleep
Yeah.
masculine
Yeah.
energy that actually is not an authority figure in his or her own life, because it applies to women as well, right? And it completely destroys society, and then it allows
That's right.
those distorted figures who are
Mhm.
very ego-based, you could say
Yes.
narcissistic traits, to
Yes.
rise and take
Yes.
over. And it's almost like, we say that they're the enemy, but
Mhm.
really they just kind of slid in there
Yeah.
because everybody else went to sleep, and they
Yeah.
took advantage. They
Yes.
took, they're opportunists pretty
Yes.
much. So
Precisely.
if we want to defeat them, we don't go out and, seek revenge. What
Mhm.
we do is we strengthen our own masculine energy with these
Yes.
tips that you've given, right? And so then we can get to this place where we begin to call back the leadership to our families, to our communities.
Right.
And that's the way we pull all of that energy away from those that want to continue to control humanity and keep them enslaved and keep them
Precisely.
unawakened.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. And I really love the point that you said that they're on autopilot. And I would even go even deeper into that and say it's like a numbing. People are numb to the society. My friend so eloquently said, there are no healthy fish in a polluted stream. And he further added, if you are a healthy person, if you are a sick person in a healthy society, you need to heal. If you are a healthy person in a sick society, you need to leave. And so what has happened is that the entire system and society that we're living in is designed to keep people distracted and angry and in their lower states of consciousness in the limbic system, the fight or flight parts of your brain. And so if we're just worrying about surviving and paying our bills and just staying alive and dealing with things that are not within our dharma, men will go into this defense mode of just like forgetting about it. Well, they'll just like drink until their brain stops, and then they'll just watch sports, and then they'll just not live according to their purpose. And they won't be inspired to live something greater because they're just trying to numb themselves from the negativity of the society that people are born into, right? And that's why it's so important to seek a higher purpose. Your higher purpose isn't just making a lot of money and paying for your kids to, I don't know, go to Disney World. It's so much more than that, right? It's so
Right,
much.
right.
No.
Yeah, it really comes down to that spiritual leadership too,
Yes.
because it's, we're missing that component. And so we tend to worship the masculine who has figured out the system and knows how to hack the system to get the financial abundance. And that's not it, right? That's
Mhm.
not it. We notice there's something missing, because every single time we allow those types of masculine energies to rise, we see that behind the shadows, there's all this wounding,
Yeah.
and there's all this stuff hidden there because they haven't taken spiritual authority.
Yes.
Maybe they know they're a master of the physical realm, but they don't know how to master emotions, and they haven't yet integrated the feminine either. That's another part. But I do think we're seeing a shift. I do think that humanity is wanting more authenticity with leaders in
Yes.
general. And it starts with the leadership within ourselves, then the
Yep.
leadership in our families, leadership in our communities, and then we'll be able to shift society. That's what I believe.
Precisely. Yeah, totally. So you want to give your tips away? All the golden nuggets. We want the golden nuggets, Laura.
I feel that you really, you nailed it.
Yeah.
And you talked about how this applies to feminines as well. And so, I do want to keep this video a little shorter. And so I think we're pretty good. I feel that, there's more to get into. And so that's why Don and I are going to do a second video with a little bit more of practical, very, very tangible tips on how to deal with or how to create conscious relationships, or how to deal with relationships where one person is conscious and maybe the other person isn't, which is what we're seeing a lot of in society, because people are slowly awakening and not everyone is awakening at the same time. Not everyone is destined to awaken at this time. So we're going to look at the relationships, and that's going to be in our second video, but we're going to wrap this one up. But before we end, Don, I'd love for you to just tell people where they can find you and how they could work with you.
Yeah, totally. Well, I am most active on Instagram. I'm going to start making stuff on TikTok for the younger audiences. Oh, save me. But you can find me at Becoming the Divine Vessel. Just Instagram / Becoming the Divine Vessel. And you'll find me there. I'm very active on direct messages. If you want to talk to me, I am totally an open book, and I'm just here to help you with whatever you need. So just feel free to send me a DM and we'll have a conversation. And I think that the link will be in the bio under YouTube or something. I'll give that to you and you can type it over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will put your link below. And for those of you that are new here, I'm also on Instagram. I'm very active on there. My Instagram handle is @LauraTheWokenMind. And I will also put down the links for how you can work with me as well. So that will be below. And again, we will see you for the next video.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, for having me on.
Thank you.